Captain Lee Ji-won checked his flight controls one last time as his small ship moved through the darkness of space. The Peregrine was not built for war. It was a simple courier vessel, designed to carry supplies and messages between Earth's colonies. Today his cargo hold was filled with medical supplies for Mars Colony 7. The colonists there were fighting a disease outbreak and needed the medicine badly. Ji-won had been flying for the Korean Space Defense Force for 8 years. He started as a fighter pilot in Falcon Squadron, one of Earth's best combat units. His uniform still carried the patch showing a fierce bird with Korean writing beneath it. The Falcon was his symbol, representing speed, precision, and the hunter's instinct. But today he was not hunting. He was delivering hope to people who needed it most. The flight from Earth to Mars usually took 3 days through normal space routes. Ji-won preferred these quiet missions. They gave him time to think and remember why he chose to serve humanity among the stars. The first sign of trouble came as a blip on his scanner. Something large was moving toward him from the outer system. Very large. Ji-won frowned and adjusted his instruments. Whatever was approaching was bigger than any human ship he had ever seen. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Lee Ji-won of the Earth Defense Force. He spoke into his communicator. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Only silence answered him. The object on his scanner grew larger as it approached. Soon, Ji-won could see it with his own eyes through the cockpit window. His breath caught in his throat. The ship was massive beyond anything humans had ever built. It stretched for kilometers, dark metal covered with strange glowing patterns. The design was completely alien, unlike any Earth technology. Ji-won had heard rumors that other intelligent species existed in the galaxy, but this was the first time any human had seen proof. The alien ship moved with surprising grace for something so large. It positioned itself directly in front of the Peregrine, blocking Ji-won's path to Mars. Strange lights began to pulse along its hull in what might have been a pattern or language. Ji-won's training kicked in immediately. He began recording everything. His sensors could detect about the alien vessel. The data would be valuable to Earth scientists and military leaders if he could find a way to get it back to them. This is Captain Lee Ji-won, he tried again. I am on a peaceful mission carrying medical supplies. I mean no harm to you or your people. This time something responded, but not with words. A beam of bright blue energy reached out from the alien ship and wrapped around the Peregrine. Ji-won felt his ship shudder as the beam took hold. His engines stopped responding to his commands. The steering controls went dead in his hands. He was caught in some kind of tractor beam, being pulled toward the massive alien vessel. Ji-won worked, frantically at his controls, trying everything he could think of to break free. Nothing worked. The alien technology was far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. As his ship was drawn closer, Ji-won could see details of the alien vessel's surface. It was covered with symbols and markings that meant nothing to him. Weapon ports and sensor arrays dotted the hull. This was clearly a warship, built for conquest rather than exploration. A section of the alien ship's hull began to open, revealing a docking bay large enough to hold dozens of ships the size of the Peregrine. Bright lights illuminated the interior as Ji-won's ship was pulled inside. He could see other vessels already docked there, ships with designs he did not recognize. They belonged to species he had never seen before. The Peregrine settled onto a docking platform with a soft thud. Ji-won could hear the hiss of atmosphere being pumped into the bay around his ship. The aliens wanted him alive, which was either very good news or very bad news. He decided to assume it was bad news and prepare accordingly. Ji-won quickly activated his ship's emergency beacon, hoping the signal would somehow reach Earth. He also started the automatic data transmission that would upload everything his sensors had recorded to any human ship that came within range. If he did not survive this encounter, at least Earth would know what had happened to him. Through his cockpit window, Ji-won saw them approaching. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. They wore what looked like environmental suits, though he could see their faces through transparent visors. Their eyes were large and dark, their mouths small and thin. They moved with confident, measured steps that spoke of intelligence and purpose. One of the aliens, taller than the others and wearing more elaborate clothing, stepped forward. It raised a device that projected holographic symbols in the air between them. The symbols shifted and changed, clearly some form of communication attempt. Jiwon could not understand the meaning, but the intent seemed clear. They wanted him to come out of his ship. He had two choices. He could try to fight from inside the Peregrine, though his ship had only basic defensive systems and was completely outmatched. Or he could surrender and hope to learn more about these aliens and their intentions. The decision was made for him when the aliens activated another device. The Peregrine's systems began shutting down one by one. Life support, artificial gravity, even the lights went dark. They were forcing him out by making his ship uninhabitable. Jiwon stood slowly and straightened his uniform. The Falcon patch on his shoulder caught the light from the alien ship. He thought of his training instructors back on Earth, particularly Sergeant Park Minji, who had taught him that a true warrior never stops fighting even when capture seems certain. Remember, she had told him during survival training, the mission does not end when you are captured. It changes. Your new mission is to survive, gather intelligence, and find a way to return that intelligence to Earth. Jiwon opened the airlock of his ship and stepped out into the alien vessel. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a strange metallic taste. The aliens surrounded him immediately, though they did not seem to consider him a physical threat. The tall alien approached and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through metal pipes. A translation device on its belt created words that Jiwon could understand. I am Commander Krelthos of the Vorthak Empire. You are now a specimen for scientific study. You will not be harmed if you cooperate with our research. Jiwon looked directly into the alien's large dark eyes and spoke clearly. I am Captain Lee Jiwon of the Korean Space Defense Force, representing Earth and all humanity. I demand to know why you have attacked a peaceful vessel and taken me prisoner. Krelthos made a sound that might have been laughter. Demands. How interesting. Most species beg or cower when they realize their situation. Your kind may prove more entertaining than we expected. As the aliens escorted him deeper into their ship, Jiwon's mind was already working. He observed everything around him, memorizing the layout of corridors, the placement of security devices, the behavior patterns of his captors. They saw him as a specimen to be studied, but they had made their first mistake. They had forgotten that falcons, even when caged, never stop being hunters. The containment cell was a cube made of some kind of energy field that glowed with a soft blue light. Jiwon could see through the walls but could not touch them without receiving a sharp electric shock. The floor was solid metal, cold against his boots. A simple bench extended from one wall and a small alcove provided basic necessities. Commander Krelthos had left him here 3 hours ago. Since then, Jiwon had carefully tested every surface of his prison. The energy walls were uniform. In strength, the floor showed no weak points and the ceiling was too high to reach even if he jumped. To most beings, this cell would be escape-proof. But Jiwon was not most beings. He was human. The door to the chamber opened with a hiss, and a new alien entered. This one was smaller than Krelthos, with more delicate features and clothing that looked like a scientist's coat. Several devices hung from a belt around its waist, and it carried a tablet covered with symbols and lights. I am Dr. Velnara, the alien said through its translation device. I will be studying your species. Please remain calm and cooperative. This will make the process easier for both of us. Jiwon stood up slowly from the bench where he had been, sitting. What kind of study? We wish to understand how your species thinks and behaves. The Vorthak Empire has encountered many intelligent races. We catalog their abilities, their weaknesses, their social structures. This knowledge helps us determine the best way to integrate them into our civilization. The word integrate sounded pleasant, but Jiwon suspected it meant something much darker. And if a species does not wish to be integrated? Dr. Velnara tilted her head in what might have been curiosity. That choice is not offered. The Vorthak way brings order to the galaxy. Primitive species benefit from our guidance. She activated her tablet and began scanning Jiwan from head to toe. Lights played across his body as the device recorded everything about his biology. Dr. Velnara made notes as she worked, occasionally making sounds of interest or surprise. "Fascinating," she said after several minutes. "Your muscle density is much higher than we expected for a species of your size. Your bone structure shows evidence of high-gravity adaptation, yet your world's gravity is only slightly above galactic average. How do you explain this?" Jiwan decided that basic cooperation might help him learn more about his captors. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us in many different ways. We became strong because we had to be strong to survive. Interesting. And this symbol on your clothing? Dr. Velnara pointed to the Falcon patch on his uniform. Our translation: systems identify it as a predatory bird from your world. The Falcon. It represents my squadron. We chose it because falcons are hunters. They are fast, smart, and they never give up once they have chosen their target. Dr. Velnara made more notes. How fitting that we have caged a creature named after a predatory bird. Perhaps we will learn much about human nature from this irony. Over the next 2 days, the studies continued. Dr. Velnara brought different devices to test Jiwan's reflexes, memory, problem-solving abilities, and physical strength. She asked hundreds of questions about Earth, human society, and military capabilities. She seemed particularly interested in how humans made decisions under pressure. Jiwan answered most questions honestly, but he was careful not to reveal anything that might help the Vorthak conquer Earth. When asked about Earth's defenses, he gave only general information that any enemy could learn from public sources. When asked about military strategies, he described basic tactics that were centuries old. What Dr. Velnara did not realize was that Jiwan was studying her just as carefully as she was studying him. He watched how she operated her devices, noting which button she pressed and in what order. He observed the patterns of guards who brought him food and water. He counted the seconds between patrol cycles in the corridor outside his cell. Most importantly, he studied the ship itself. Every time he was moved from his cell to the laboratory, Jiwan memorized the route. He noted the placement of security, cameras, the locations of computer terminals, and the behavior of crew members they passed. The Vorthak seemed to view him as completely helpless, so they took no special precautions during these transfers. On the second day, Dr. Velnara brought a new device that projected three-dimensional images in the air. She showed him pictures of other species the Vorthak had encountered. Some looked peaceful and intelligent. Others appeared to be fierce warriors. All of them, she explained, had been successfully integrated into the Vorthak Empire. Your species shows unusual characteristics, she told him. Most beings, when captured, either become aggressive or submissive. You remain calm but alert. You answer questions but reveal nothing of value. You seem to be waiting for something. What are you waiting for, human? Jiwan looked directly at her with steady eyes. I am waiting to see what you are truly capable of. So far you have shown me only that you are good at building cages. Dr. Velnara made another note. Defiance without aggression. Confidence despite helplessness. These traits could make your species either very valuable servants or very dangerous enemies. Which do you think we would be? That remains to be determined. On the third day, the questioning became more focused on human psychology and behavior. Dr. Velnara seemed particularly interested in concepts like loyalty, sacrifice, and revenge. She showed him images of human conflicts throughout history, asking him to explain why humans fought each other so frequently. Your species seems to engage in warfare constantly, she observed. Yet you also show remarkable cooperation when facing external threats. This contradiction is puzzling. We fight each other because we are passionate about our beliefs, Jiwan explained. But we fight together when something threatens all of us. Humans understand that some things are worth fighting for, even if the cost is high. And what would humans consider worth fighting for? Our freedom, our families, our right to choose our own path among the stars. Dr. Velnara nodded and made more notes. The psychological profile is becoming clear. Humans are a species that values independence above safety, courage above comfort. This makes them potentially dangerous, but also predictable. That evening, as Ji-won sat in his cell, he reflected on the conversations. The Vorthak were intelligent and technologically advanced, but they had a critical weakness. They believed that understanding something was the same as controlling it. They studied other species like specimens in a laboratory, never considering that their specimens might be studying them in return. Dr. Velnara had revealed much during their sessions. The Vorthak Empire controlled dozens of star systems and hundreds of species. They maintained order through superior technology and careful manipulation of subject races. They avoided direct military conquest when possible, preferring to integrate new species gradually through economic and political pressure. But they had made one crucial mistake with humans. They had assumed that capturing one human would give them insight into all humans. They did not understand that humans were individuals first and members of a species second. More importantly, they did not understand what it meant to be a soldier trained by the Korean Space Defense Force. Sergeant Park Min-ji had taught her students that information was the most valuable weapon in any conflict. She had also taught them that patience was often more important than strength. A good soldier waited for the right moment to strike, even if that moment seemed very far away. As Ji-won lay on the hard bench that served as his bed, he smiled for the first time since his capture. Dr. Velnara thought she was studying a caged falcon. She had no idea that the falcon was studying her right back, learning everything he needed to know about his captors. Tomorrow, he would begin the next phase of his mission. On the fourth night, Ji-won put his plan into action. For 3 days, he had studied every detail of his prison and the ship around it. He had learned the patrol schedules, the power cycles, and most importantly, the weakness in his containment cell that the Vorthak had never considered. The energy field that held him prisoner was powered by the ship's main reactor. Like all power systems, it had regular cycles when energy levels fluctuated slightly to prevent overheating. During these brief moments, the field strength dropped by a tiny amount. For most species, this would mean nothing. The drop was so small that escape would still be impossible. But Ji-won was not most species. He was human, and humans had spent thousands of years learning to use tools and physics to overcome impossible odds. He had carefully removed several metallic threads from his uniform over the past 2 days, threads so thin that his captors had not noticed their absence. Korean military uniforms were designed with hidden metal fibers that could serve as emergency equipment if needed. Now Ji-won would use them for a purpose their designers had never imagined. At exactly 0300 hours ship time, when the corridor outside was empty and the power cycle reached its lowest point, Ji-won went to work. He had timed this moment perfectly, counting the seconds through hundreds of cycles until he knew the pattern by heart. He twisted the metal threads together and touched them to a specific point on the energy field wall. The threads conducted electricity, creating a feedback loop in the containment system. For exactly 2.3 seconds, the field flickered and weakened. 3 seconds was not much time. For a Vorthak, with their careful movements and deliberate actions, it would have been useless. But Ji-won had trained for zero-gravity combat, where every millisecond mattered. He had practiced emergency escapes until his body could react faster than his mind could think. He rolled through the gap in the energy field like water flowing through a crack in a dam. His shoulder brushed the wall as the field snapped back to full strength, but he was already through and moving. The corridor outside was empty, just as he had expected. Ji-won moved like a shadow, using every stealth technique Sergeant Park Min-ji had taught him. The Vorthak ship was large and complex, but Ji-won had memorized the route to his primary target during his trips to the laboratory. He needed to reach the communication array. If he could send a message to Earth, the information he had gathered about the Vorthak would be worth far more than his own life. But first, he had to avoid the security systems that monitored the ship. The Vorthak had sensors everywhere, but they were designed to detect normal movement patterns. Ji-won used techniques from his military training to move in ways the sensors would not recognize as threatening. He stayed close to walls where shadows were deepest. He timed his movements to match the natural vibrations of the ship's engines. He became invisible by understanding how the alien technology worked. As he moved through the ship, Ji-won saw things that made his blood run cold. In one section, He found cells similar to his own, but these were empty. Computer displays nearby showed records of dozens of species that had been studied by the Vorthak. Most of the records ended with the same notation, translated by his understanding of their symbols as integration complete. In another area, he discovered manufacturing, facilities where Vorthak workers were building weapons and ships using designs clearly stolen from other species. The Vorthak did not just conquer other races. They absorbed everything useful about them and discarded the rest. Jiwan took mental notes of everything he saw, but he did not stop to investigate further. His mission was clear, and time was running out. Soon the guards would discover his empty cell and the entire ship would be searching for him. The communication array was located near the ship's center, heavily protected and monitored. Getting there undetected required all of Jiwan's skill and training. He crawled through maintenance shafts, climbed along power conduits, and squeezed through spaces barely large enough for his human frame. When he finally reached the communication center, Jiwan found it guarded by two Vorthak technicians. They were focused on their work, monitoring signals from across the galaxy. Jiwan waited in the shadows until both technicians moved to the far side of the room, then slipped to the main console. The Vorthak communication system was more advanced than anything on Earth, but the basic principles were the same. Jiwan had studied their technology during his time as a prisoner, and his training as a pilot had taught him to adapt quickly to new equipment. He activated the transmitter and aimed it toward Earth's solar system. The message he sent was brief, but contained everything Earth needed to know about the Vorthak threat: their location, their capabilities, their plans for human civilization, and most importantly, their weaknesses. As he finished the transmission, Jiwan heard alarms beginning to sound throughout the ship. His escape had been discovered. Soon, hundreds of Vorthak soldiers would be searching for him. He could try to find an escape pod or steal a small ship, but the chances of success were very small. Instead, Jiwan made a decision that would have surprised his captors if they could have understood it. Rather than attempt to flee, he chose to continue his mission in a different way. He began moving through the ship again, but this time his goal was not escape. He was implementing the second part of his plan, something he had been preparing since his first day in captivity. Using his knowledge of Vorthak technology, Jiwan began placing small sabotages throughout the ship. A loosened connection here, a modified program there. Nothing that would cause immediate damage, but everything designed to create problems later. He planted viruses in their computer systems, viruses based on human programming logic that the Vorthak security systems would not recognize as threats. The beautiful thing about his sabotage was its subtlety. The Vorthak would not notice the problems for days or weeks. By then, the damage would spread throughout their network, crippling their ability to coordinate attacks or communicate with their fleet. As Jiwan worked, he thought about his training and the lessons that had brought him to this moment. Sergeant Park Minji had always taught her students that sometimes the best way to win a battle was to make sure your enemy could not fight the next one. The alarms were getting louder now, and Jiwan could hear search teams moving through nearby corridors. His time was almost up, but he had one more task to complete, the most important one. He made his way to Dr. Velnara's laboratory, where he had spent so many hours being studied and questioned. The room was empty now, all the Vorthak crew busy searching for the escaped prisoner. Jiwan sat down at Dr. Velnara's computer terminal and began to write. The message he composed was not for his captors alone. It was for every species in the galaxy that had faced the Vorthak Empire, and for those who would face them in the future. It was a declaration and a promise, written in perfect Vorthak script, that he had learned during his imprisonment. When he finished writing, Jiwan calmly walked back toward his cell. The search teams were getting closer, and he could hear their frustrated communications as they tried to understand how a primitive human had moved through their ship undetected. He reached his cell just as the first guards arrived. The energy field was still active, humming with power, looking exactly as it had when he left. Jiwan walked through the gap he had created earlier, timing his entry to match another power cycle fluctuation. By the time the guards reached his cell, Jiwan was sitting quietly on his bench, looking exactly like a prisoner who had never left his cage. The guards checked their instruments, confused by readings that showed no sign of escape or intrusion. But in Dr. Velnara's laboratory, a message waited on her computer screen. A message that would change everything the Vorthak thought they knew about humanity. A message that would remind them of something they had forgotten in their arrogance and sense of superiority. They had tried to cage a falcon, but falcons were not meant to be caged. And now the falcon had left them a gift that would teach them the true meaning of human nature. The next morning, Dr. Velnara arrived at her laboratory with excitement in her step. The human specimen had provided fascinating data over the past 3 days, and she was eager to continue her research. The escaped prisoner alert from the night before had been a false alarm according to security reports. All prisoners remained safely contained. She activated her computer terminal and began reviewing her notes from the previous day. The human's psychological profile was nearly complete, and Commander Krelthos was waiting for her final report. The Vorthak fleet needed to understand human weaknesses before they began their invasion of Earth's colonies. But as her computer screen flickered to life, Dr. Velnara froze. There, displayed in perfect Vorthak script, was a message she had not written. The words glowed on her screen with an intensity that seemed to burn into her mind. You study us like we are animals in a cage, but you forgot what we are. We are the species that turned wolves into companions, that climbed down from trees and reached for the stars. We are the children of a world that has tried to kill us since the day we drew breath, and we not only survived, we thrived. Dr. Velnara's hands trembled as she read further. The message continued with words that chilled her to her core. You cannot cage what was born to be free. This is not a threat. This is a reminder. We know where you are now, and we are coming. At the bottom of the message was a simple signature. Captain Lee Ji-won, Falcon Squadron, Korean Space Defense Force, representing Earth and all her children. Dr. Velnara immediately called for security. Within minutes, Commander Krelthos arrived, with a full squad of guards. They rushed to the human's cell, expecting to find it empty or damaged. Instead, they found Captain Ji-won sitting calmly on his bench, reading from a small book he had been allowed to keep. How did you write this message? Commander Krelthos demanded, his translator device crackling with anger. Ji-won looked up from his book with innocent eyes. What message? I have been in this cell since yesterday evening. Your guards can confirm this. The security recordings showed exactly what Ji-won claimed. There was no evidence that he had ever left his cell. The energy field had remained stable all night. No alarms had been triggered in the laboratory section. Yet somehow a message written in perfect Vorthak script had appeared on Dr. Velnara's computer. This is impossible, Dr. Velnara whispered. How could you access my laboratory? Computer from inside this cell? Perhaps your computer systems are not as secure as you believe, Ji-won replied calmly. Or perhaps you underestimate what humans are capable of when we put our minds to something. Commander Krelthos ordered a complete security sweep of the ship. Teams of technicians checked every system, every sensor, every computer terminal. What they found made no sense according to their understanding of technology and physics. Small modifications had been made throughout the ship's computer network. Tiny changes to code that were so subtle they had gone unnoticed by all security systems. These modifications were spreading slowly through the network like a virus, but unlike any virus the Vorthak had ever encountered. The changes followed patterns based on human logic and mathematics. They were designed to activate later, creating cascading failures in critical systems. Weapons controls, navigation, communications, even life support would all be affected when the programs fully deployed. How is this possible? Dr. Velnara asked her technical team. The human never had access to our computers. He was under constant observation. The lead technician, a Vorthak named Zilkar, shook his head in confusion. The modifications show understanding of our systems that should be impossible for any outsider. Whoever did this would need weeks of study and direct access to our core programming. Commander Krelthos stared at the human prisoner through the energy field. Captain, Ji-won had returned to reading his book, apparently unconcerned by the chaos his message had created. The calm confidence in the human's behavior was more disturbing than any threat or display of anger would have been. "What are you?" Krelthos asked. Jiwan closed his book and stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had never truly been a prisoner, despite his circumstances. "I am what my people call a soldier, but more than that, I am what you feared to find when you decided to study humanity. I am proof that you cannot understand us by putting us in cages and running tests. You are one individual. Your entire species cannot possess abilities like yours." Jiwan smiled, and for the first time since his capture, the expression was not friendly. "That is your second mistake. Your first mistake was capturing me. Your second mistake is thinking that I am special among my people." Dr. Velnara stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "Explain what you mean." "Every human child learns to solve problems that would challenge your greatest minds. We grow up in a world where cooperation and individual thinking are both necessary for survival. We are raised on stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they have to." Jiwan walked to the edge of his cell, as close to his captors as the energy field would allow. "You studied my body and found it stronger than you expected. You tested my mind and found it more flexible than your models predicted. But you never understood the most important thing about humans." "Which is what?" "We are never truly alone, even when separated by vast distances. Even when captured by enemies, we remain connected to each other through bonds you cannot measure or understand. When you took me prisoner, you did not capture one human. You declared war on all humanity." "Commander." Krelthos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. "You sent a message to your people, but our sensors detected no transmissions from this ship." "Did they not?" Jiwan asked. "Are you certain?" The silence that followed was more frightening than any scream. Dr. Velnara began checking her instruments, frantically reviewing transmission logs and sensor data. What she found made her legs weak with shock. 3 days ago, exactly when the human claimed to have been continuously imprisoned, there had been a brief transmission from the ship toward Earth's solar system. It had lasted only seconds and had been masked to look like routine stellar interference. The message had gone completely unnoticed until now. "Impossible," she breathed. "You were monitored constantly. You never left your cell." "Are you sure about that?" Jiwan asked. "Your instruments told you I never escaped, yet somehow I accessed your computers. Your sensors showed no transmission, yet a message was sent to Earth. Perhaps your technology is not as reliable as you believed." "Commander." Krelthos was beginning to understand that they had made a terrible error. This human was not just a specimen to be studied. He was a warrior who had been fighting them from the moment of his capture, and they had been too arrogant to realize it. "What was in the message you sent to Earth?" "Everything," Jiwan replied simply. "Your location, your capabilities, your plans, your weaknesses. But most importantly, I sent them proof that the Vorthak Empire is not invincible. I showed them that you can be beaten by someone who understands that strength is not just about technology or numbers." Dr. Velnara looked at her readings again, trying to understand how the human had accomplished the impossible. "The virus in our systems, how did you create it without access to our computers?" "I watched you work for 3 days. I learned your programming language by observing your devices. I understood your network architecture by studying the patterns of data flow around the ship. Humans are very good at learning new things quickly when our survival depends on it. But the physical access, how did you reach the terminals?" Jiwan sat back down on his bench and opened his book again. "That is the wrong question, Doctor. The right question is not how I did what I did. The right question is what my people will do when they receive my message." Commander Krelthos felt the first stirrings of something the Vorthak rarely experienced: fear. "And what will they do?" "They will come for me," Jiwan said without looking up from his book. "And when they do, you will learn the difference between studying humanity and facing humanity in battle." The human returned to his reading, leaving his captors to contemplate the full meaning of his words. In the silence of the laboratory, The only sound was the soft hum of computer systems slowly being corrupted by a virus created by a supposedly primitive human mind. Outside the ship, in the vast darkness of space, radio waves carrying a human message continued their journey toward Earth at the speed of light. 3 weeks had passed since Captain G1's message reached Earth. The Vorthak fleet, confident in their superior technology, prepared for what they believed would be an easy conquest of humanity's outer colonies. Commander Krelthos had dismissed the humans' warnings as desperate bluffing from a defeated enemy. The Vorthak armada consisted of 200 warships, each more powerful than anything in Earth's known arsenal. Their plan was simple, and had worked against dozens of other species. They would destroy a few military targets to demonstrate their strength, then demand surrender. Most civilizations chose submission over annihilation. Admiral Kim Tae-hee stood on the bridge of the flagship Incheon, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. She was a veteran of many battles, having served in the Korean Space Defense Force for 20 years. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Combined Fleet Command. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Park Hyunwoo, Captain Ji-won's former wingman from Falcon Squadron. "They are moving toward the Mars colonies as predicted." "How many ships?" 200 confirmed, ma'am. All of them larger than our biggest cruisers." Admiral Kim nodded. The numbers matched what Captain Ji-won had reported in his transmission. His intelligence had been invaluable in preparing Earth's response to the Vorthak threat. But numbers and size were not everything in space combat. Signal the fleet. Begin Phase 1. Throughout the solar system, human ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind moons began to move. Earth's response was not what the Vorthak expected. Instead of meeting them with large warships, humanity had chosen a different approach. The human fleet consisted of thousands of small, fast vessels. Fighters, corvettes, and modified civilian ships had been armed with new weapons based on technology, reverse-engineered from Captain Ji-won's detailed observations of Vorthak systems. Every ship was crewed by volunteers who understood they were fighting for humanity's freedom. Captain Song Min-ho piloted his fighter toward the enemy formation, his heart pounding with excitement and fear. He had trained for this moment ever since the alien message reached Earth. His ship was small and fragile compared to the massive Vorthak vessels, but it carried something the aliens had never encountered before. "Remember your training, Admiral." Kim's voice came through the communication system. "Hit fast, hit hard, and trust in your equipment." The first phase of the battle began when the human fighters reached weapons range. Instead of the primitive missiles and energy weapons the Vorthak expected, the human ships fired something completely different. The weapons were based on Vorthak technology, but modified with human engineering principles. Captain Song watched his missile streak toward a Vorthak cruiser. The weapon looked ordinary from the outside, but inside it carried a computer virus identical to the one Captain Ji-won had planted in the enemy flagship weeks earlier. When the missile struck the alien ship's shields, the virus transferred into their defensive systems. Across the battlefield, hundreds of similar attacks struck the Vorthak fleet. The aliens were confused by weapons that seemed to do no physical damage. Their shields absorbed the impacts easily, and their ships showed no signs of harm. Commander Krelthos, watching from his flagship, felt satisfied with the battle's progress. As expected, human technology is primitive. Their weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. But Dr. Velnara, monitoring the ship's computer systems, noticed something troubling. "Commander, I am detecting unusual activity in our network. The human attacks appear to have carried some form of digital payload." "Explain." "The same virus signature we found in our systems 3 weeks ago. It is spreading through the fleet's communication network." Before Commander Krelthos could respond, alarms began sounding throughout his ship. Computer systems that had functioned perfectly for years suddenly began failing. Weapon controls locked up. Navigation systems provided false readings. Communication arrays went silent. The virus that Captain Ji-won had designed was finally activating. But it was not acting alone. The new viruses carried by the human missiles were combining with the original infection, creating a cascade failure that spread from ship to ship through the Vorthak fleet's interconnected systems. Within minutes, the mighty Vorthak armada was crippled. Ships drifted helplessly as their crews struggled to regain control of basic systems. Weapons that had conquered star systems could not fire. Shields that had deflected planet-killing attacks flickered and died. "This is impossible," Commander Krelthos shouted. "How could primitive humans create viruses that affect our most advanced systems?" Dr. Velnara worked frantically at her console, trying to understand what was happening. The virus architecture is based on human logic patterns, but it demonstrates complete understanding of our technology. Whoever created this spent weeks studying our systems in detail. The answer came as a new voice spoke over the communication system. It was Captain Jiwan, broadcasting from the Vorthak flagship where he remained prisoner. "Commander Krelthos, this is Captain Lee Jiwan. I told you that you had forgotten what humans are. We are not just another species to be cataloged and conquered. We are survivors, innovators, and protectors of our own." On the bridge of the Incheon, Admiral Kim smiled as she heard her captured officer's voice. The plan was working perfectly. Captain Jiwan had done more than send intelligence to Earth. He had prepared the groundwork for the Vorthak fleet's destruction. "All ships, begin Phase 2, Admiral Kim commanded. The human fleet, no longer facing functional enemy weapons, closed in on the disabled Vorthak vessels. Boarding parties launched from assault ships heading for the alien flagship and other key targets. The humans were not seeking to destroy the Vorthak fleet entirely. They wanted prisoners, information, and most importantly, they wanted to send a message to the galaxy. Captain Park Hyunwoo led the boarding party that fought its way through the Vorthak flagship. The alien crew, trained for space combat but not close-quarters fighting, offered little resistance. Human soldiers moved through the ship's corridors with the precision of warriors who had trained for this exact scenario. They found Captain Jiwan exactly where his transmission had indicated. Still sitting calmly in his energy cell, Captain Park shut down the containment field and saluted his former squadron leader. "Captain Jiwan, sir. Earth Defense Force is here to bring you home." Jiwan stood and straightened his uniform, the Falcon patch still visible on his shoulder. "Good to see you, Hyunwoo. I trust my message was helpful." "Yes, sir. The intelligence you provided allowed us to prepare countermeasures for all their major systems. The fleet is completely disabled." As they made their way to the ship's bridge, they found Commander Krelthos and Dr. Velnara under guard by human soldiers. The Vorthak commander looked at Captain Jiwan with something approaching respect mixed with fear. "How?" was all he could say. "You made the mistake of thinking that capturing one human would teach you about all humans," Jiwan replied. "But you never understood that we are strongest when we work together. While you were studying me, I was learning everything I needed to know about you." Admiral Kim's voice came through the communication system, addressing the captured Vorthak crew. "This is Admiral Kim Tae-hee of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet has been defeated, but we are not your enemies. We seek peace, not conquest. I am here to deliver a message to the Vorthak Empire and any other species that might threaten humanity. We are not a primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. We are humans, and we have claimed our place among the stars through our own efforts. You came to our space believing that superior technology would guarantee your victory. But you forgot that technology is only as powerful as the minds that use it. And human minds, shaped by millions of years of survival on a dangerous world, are more adaptable than you imagined." The broadcast continued, reaching not just the defeated Vorthak fleet but spreading across the galaxy through subspace communication networks. Species that had never heard of humanity now learned that a new power had emerged among the stars. "We do not seek to build an empire or conquer other worlds, but we will defend ourselves and our allies with everything we possess. To those who come in peace, you will find us generous friends. To those who come with conquest in mind, you will find us dangerous enemies." Captain Jiwan looked out at the stars through the flagship's viewport. Earth was still days away, but he could feel the pull of home calling to him. His mission was complete. He had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of when threatened. "What happens to them now?" he asked, indicating the Vorthak prisoners. "We will return them to their empire with a message," Admiral Kim replied through the communication system. The same message you left for Dr. Velnara but delivered by their own people. You forgot what we are. The Vorthak Empire, humbled by their defeat, would retreat to the far reaches of the galaxy. In their archives, they kept detailed records of their encounter with humanity, but not as a species to be conquered. The files were marked with a single word in their language that roughly translated to untouchable. And throughout the galaxy, the legend began to spread. Never try to cage a human, for they are creatures born of earth and sky, and they will always find their way home. More importantly, they will always protect their own. Captain Li Ji-wan, the Falcon who had been caged, had taught the universe a lesson that would not be forgotten. Humanity had announced its presence among the stars, not with conquest, but with the simple declaration that they would never bow to any other species. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, built on a foundation of freedom, determination, and the unbreakable bonds between those who called Earth home.